soon, the Dark Lord and his army will march all over Mordor. But a great power can be awakened.
Didn't I make a trophy of you already? Now make you dead!
Show your father what you have, huh? Wouldn't want to hurt you.
Look how many of us there are!
Easy, son.
I'll have your guts! Why not just lie down and die?
Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is an open-world action RPG that sees you take the role of a ranger from Gondor. Talion and his garrison are stationed at the Black Gate of Mordor when they're attacked by Sauron's forces, led by 3 terrifying black captains and the Black Hand of Sauron.
After a valiant struggle, Talion, his wife, and his son are all killed in a ritual sacrifice by the Black Hand and his not-so-merry men, in an attempt to summon the wraith of an elf lord, Celebrimbor.
Somehow, though, the wraith manages to become merged with Talion, and he rises again to fight another day, now armed with cool wraithy powers.
Go back to him.
On the surface, it appears to be a bit of a stock-standard story of vengeance, but the wraith inside Talion adds an extra layer of mystery, I thought.
Yeah, Celebrimbor has a case of wraith-induced amnesia. So figuring out who he was and what his role in the greatest story of The Lord of the Rings is where it gets more interesting. And the story really starts to open up the further you get in.
Yeah, and they've meticulously mined the appropriate lore from the universe to craft this story. I just wish they'd done a little bit more to flesh it out at the start to create more of a foundation for these characters.
Did you talk to my father?
From a player perspective, it kind of just feels like some stuff happens and then you're thrown into the wilderness of Mordor with a wraith inside you. Now, go play.
Yeah, it did feel like that a bit, and likewise, there isn't much in the way of tutorials either, but I kind of like that. I find it refreshing that there is a bit of assumed knowledge in a game like this. It doesn't faff about, you just get in there, start exploring and working things out for yourself.
Yeah, I didn't mind it either, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this game is pretty unfriendly to newcomers. There is wonderful depth to the combat systems and the way you approach the world itself, but not a lot of time is spent explaining it to you.
Setting out into the world, Mordor takes the form of open-world games like Assassin's Creed, with towers that need to be unlocked to open up zones on the map.
It's very Assassins, isn't it? I definitely got deja vu leaping off those towers.
What do you know of them? Are they men or demons?
They were once men.
Me too. There's even a bit of a free-running approach to navigating the environment.
Yeah, it's perhaps not as fluid or as well implemented, but this game doesn't really focus on that. Talion is a ranger, not an assassin. But we should move on to the combat.
The fight mechanics in Shadow of Mordor feel very much like the Batman games, relying on counters to get your hit count up, and then using finishes to inflict damage. It works perfectly for these large-scale fights. In fact, I think the combat in this game is better than the Batman games.
Yeah, and just like the Batman games, there's no randomly mashing your way through this. You need to be constantly timing your counters and slowly weakening enemies, using them to get your multiplier up. Because tougher captains and war chiefs will need to be worn down by those heavier hitting attacks.
Too tough for you.
It's still pretty mashy, but it's strategic mashy.
Yeah.
There's very little room for error when you're cornered and overwhelmed. And you do get a kind of last chance quick time advantage when you are close to being downed. But you'll only get to do that a couple of times before it's over, so avoiding damage is pretty important.
But they've hit such a great balance with it too. Because through a nice drip feed of abilities, you'll end up with a combination of AoE attacks, stuns, shanks, and throws to keep the flow of combat interesting. There's a good variety of enemies as well, with brutes and shielded guys in there.
Some will raise an alarm calling in more enemies, so there's a lot to keep on top of in a fight. I think they've just made such smart choices in terms of where they've decided to draw their influences from when it comes to the combat. It's refined and familiar, and yet unique.
I agree. Likewise with your weapons, they're all really fun to use. I love the bow. It's a brilliant weapon with powerful arrows that are easy to channel into headshots. And Talion's dagger comes in handy for stealth kills, which is actually a broken sword, very appropriate to Lord of the Rings. And speaking of stealth, how good is the Conga stealth takedown?
Those guys have to stop walking in single file.
But the single most innovative feature of Shadows of Mordor is an entirely new game mechanic, which the devs have touted as the Nemesis system.
Snargog.
Yes, taking on an orc captain for the first time, it's pretty nerve-wracking.
Manskin! The edge! The edge! Ever so slow as it peels away.
But get used to it, because a large portion of the game is spent figuring out the smartest way to take these guys down. Win the battle, you pick another captain, and can continue working your way up the chain. But if you lose, he'll rank up, gaining power and strength.
Who kill man, get promoted.
You can mark them as targets, but your time isn't necessarily spent just seeking them out though.
Yeah, I love how you can just bump into them when you're out exploring the environment or completing other challenges.
Skin! I've been wondering when we'd meet again. Now I'll never have to ask that.
Yeah, these are tough fights, however. And often they take place in strongholds with loads of other enemies, so things can get out of hand really quickly, and you'll often be overwhelmed.
Yeah, this is not a game where you want to be ashamed of running away.
No, it isn't.
Well, at least one of us is happy.
But there's loads of ways to approach a fight and try and turn things to your advantage, which is where this game really shines. The environment itself plays a big part in just helping you keep large groups of orcs at bay, with barrels of fire, nests of demonic bees, or you can release a Caragor to cause havoc while you get a handle on things. I love how they're not just bees, they're demonic bees.
A lot of it too is using fear itself as a weapon, using the orcs' weaknesses against them. For example, you can stealthily attack a stronghold, taking out enemies one by one.
And then the captain will promote me. You'll
Or perform a horrifying brutalized kill on an enemy, causing many of the others to flee at the sheer sight of you.
This manipulation of fear is also key to taking out captains and war chiefs. Charging into a fight unprepared is far less likely to land you a victory than if you do a little bit of research first.
Yes, using your wraith powers to gain intel from orcs is practically a necessity to take down some of the tougher enemies, as they'll divulge their location, all of their weaknesses, as well as their strengths and invulnerabilities.
Yeah, so for example, some enemies might have a mortal fear of demon flies or Caragors, making them a terrified, easy target.
And some captains or war chiefs can be one-hit killed with a stealth finisher. But on the flip side, if you burn them, they become enraged, which makes them stronger and tougher to kill. So it pays to do a bit of investigation when you choose how you approach each fight.
Yeah, in saying that though, you can do all the research you like, but each fight will undoubtedly throw you curveballs, because these guys rarely hang out on their own. I'd have often carefully planned a fight using all of my intel, only to discover my target had 3 other captain buddies hanging out with him.
ready for us, Ranger.
Which turns a tough fight into a full-on slaughter.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot too. I love how when each new captain rocks up, there's that whole WWE-style wrestler intro where it comes up with their name and they're like, I'm gonna tear you apart!
Pain don't scare me. You don't scare me. Another schrock that needs to be put back in its place. What do you eat that gives you such vitality?
But incredibly, they're all unique enemies that are randomly generated.
It gives them so much personality, doesn't it? I love how it plays that chant throughout the fight of their name as well, like Bagaboo, Bagaboo, Bagaboo. It's madness. And in those multi-captain fights, I'd often get overwhelmed and a little part inside of me would just give up and I'd just be like, no, I wasn't prepared for this, it's too much. And then when you die, every single captain you encountered in that fight will rank up and become stronger. Whoa! I hate you all. I mean, it almost feels counterintuitive because the worse you do, the harder it gets.
I know what you mean, but it's also a combat system that you really learn from, meaning you never approach a failed fight the same way again.
Here is your end.
Yeah, plus it really pushes you to take better advantage of those weaknesses and drawing enemies out. Plus, I love how they remember you if they fought or killed you before.
So the coward Tark returned from the dead to challenge me again.
Yeah, and they even retained the injuries that you've given them. Amazing.
Filth! You gave me this scar. Now I'll give you a slow, painful death.
My favourite way to approach a captain fight is to just ride a Caragor in there and get down to business.
Deceiving the odd killer. Gotta go!
I like the Caragors, but I like them even more when I realized they could climb up walls.
I know, and I was just thinking if only this game had some sort of mount, and then boom, tame a Caragor and you can take it on Caragor adventures. But back to the fights.
Yes, certain mechanics have been implemented to balance the battles as well. For example, when an enemy ranks up, he'll often battle it out with another Orc or Uruk in the same army. Meaning that an enemy that you've been having a tough time with might be taken out for you anyway.
Also, there's the opportunity for you and anyone who's playing the game on your friends list to participate in vengeance kills.
Doomsar.
So when one of your friends has been killed by a captain in their game, you can revenge kill that enemy and reclaim their honor in yours. And vice versa. I really loved that.
Me too.
Plus, I always love repaying someone with a vengeance kill when they've done the same for me.
Moving further into the game, the Nemesis system starts to take more shape once you gain the ability to dominate, allowing you to take control of certain enemies to work for you.
Protect my name. Kill the traitors.
Do this on a captain, and as he moves through the ranks, he'll fight for you, acting as a mole within the army.
There are also other scenarios or power struggles that you can choose to disrupt, meaning you'll decide the outcome of whether a particular orc will rank up. And there is strategy in those decisions as well.
I wish they'd explain that strategy a bit better though.
Yeah, and I just wish that they'd introduced the whole dominate thing way earlier, because it's such a cool mechanic to have introduced so late in the game. It's very easy to get sucked into the zone with games like this, isn't it? Where they just overwhelm you with stuff to do. Hunting challenges, artifacts and side missions. And you know I was champion at picking herbs and flowers. Ooh, Athelas. But even still, I did find myself start to get a little bit worn down in the first half of the game.
The story picks up a bit though, and it makes up for that slightly rushed start, and it all complements the action, of which I never got tired of. I loved all that stuff with Gollum and how you team up with other outcast rangers or shifty orcs trying to double-cross to get ahead.
Know what you're thinking, Ranger? This was not my fault.
Yeah, but the overwhelming task of working through all of those orc war chiefs, seeing captains constantly rank up and get stronger, it all just started to feel like a bit of a slog. And the landscape itself is so bleak with essentially very little variety. It got a bit stifling.
Yeah, it's hard going, isn't it? Visually, it's beautiful, but ugly beautiful. And for an open world game, there is a lot of it that feels quite similar.
Exactly, but I just kept seeing that little gate at the bottom of the map and I thought, you know what, just maybe there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and lo and behold, green. I'm not saying I needed a Lord of the Rings game to be all elven frolics through Rivendell. I like the focus on the darker side, but honestly, getting to that second area was like taking that first gulp of fresh air after almost drowning.
Yeah, it makes all your hard work worth it, doesn't it? That area is the most beautiful reward.
Yeah, and I'm making a big deal of it because I'm worried that people will get the wrong impression that there's only so much to this game, that it's all strongholds and war chiefs. But it's a slow burn and it really opens up once you put the hours in. I really flourished in that second half. The strategy gets deeper, the story takes shape, the areas are more interesting. My fear is that gamers will get frustrated and never get there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I push through the story for the sake of time. But if you spent ages clearing each zone and trying to 100% it with all the artifacts and so on, it would be a fair while before you even glimpsed any of this.
Look, maybe that is a criticism from me in that I almost came close to exhaustion in the first half, and I think it could have used a little bit more variety earlier on.
I don't think so. I think it sets itself up as a tough fight with big rewards. And I just love that on top of cherry-picking the best mechanics from some of the most successful open-world games, they've implemented a completely new system with Nemesis, which is pretty incredible game design.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll see it popping up in loads of other games before long.
Definitely. I kind of think it's a bit revolutionary.
It is. Overall, I had a really good time with this, but I did have some pretty hardcore moments of frustration as well. At one point, it felt like I was just watching enemy after enemy call me out in fights. Plus, all the story missions were halted until you completed all the war chief kills, which made me feel a bit funneled into one grindy objective. But then I came out the other side of that absolutely loving the game again with all the dominating and the story missions.
The hunt takes your fancy. The camp's not far.
What are you giving it?
It's easily one of the most memorable games of the year so far. I'm giving it 9.5.
It's 8.5 from me.
Dead man! Shall I say goodbye when you fall and die after I pluck out your eye?